framework for making radio-ready music in your home studio. So if you don't know me already, my name's Rob Mazes. I'm a professional musician and engineer, founder of Musician on a Mission, and I've been recording and mix at home for almost 15 years now. So on a day-to-day basis, as well as kind of making music, mixing, that kind of stuff, I help musicians to make professional sounding music at home. That's what I do with Musician on a Mission. And I do this so that they can have the confidence to share their music and in many cases take the next step towards a full-time career in the industry, whether that's as a musician, a producer, an engineer, doesn't matter. Now, to help people do that really fast, I focus on keeping it simple, breaking everything down so it's straightforward and easy to understand. So that's it. My goal on this webinar is to outline every single step between your current level of quality and radio-ready mixes, so you know precisely what you need to do in order to improve. Now, most people are missing a framework. They have all these tricks and tips and small tidbits of information, but no understanding of how it all comes together. So that's what I want to give you today. So in addition to those 7 steps, you're going to learn the only 3 things that matter if you want to reach studio quality, why people get stuck on bedroom demo quality and can't seem to improve but aren't really sure why or what's holding them back, the only 7 plugins you'll ever need, how to find the right frequency to boost or cut with EQ using my weird technique called turning it up to 11 that I'm going to show you in my DAW. And then finally, at the end of the webinar, I'll invite you to work with us on a deeper level, and I'm going to give you some more information about that. So I'm giving this information away today because it's my goal to make it possible for anyone to make professional quality music at home. But at this point, you might be wondering, who the hell is this Rob Mazes guy and why should I listen to him? Well, I could tell you my whole story, but this isn't about me. It's about you, your music. So my goal is to just help you as much as possible over the next hour. However, I understand that you need to at least see some of my credibility and to be able to trust anything I'm telling you here. So let me just kind of show you some of my mixes. The proof is in the pudding. So I'm going to play a few of my recent mixes. Now, this first one you're actually going to hear was an experiment. I just went to a random Airbnb with a cheap mic and a cheap interface, nothing else. I use kind of drum software, amp simulators, that kind of stuff. So yeah, let's have a listen to some of my recent mixes.
Better know when we arrive. All the heads turn, and you better learn. Feel the heat when we walk by. We ain't here for drama. Shine like 1,000 suns. Dispel the frozen lake. We reflect the sound. I would line your clouds with gold if I could. You know I would. But if I did, even the gold would fall as leaves onto your skin. Okay, if you want to hear more, go to robmazes.com. Hopefully that gives you enough trust that I know what I'm talking about. And I just want to make it clear that I get results for other people too. That's kind of what I'm more about. So just some examples here of people that have worked with us in the past. Vincent said, after going through one of our programs, he shared it with people and they said, this sounds pro. I really enjoy this. It reminds me of Coldplay. It reminds me of Leonard Cohen. I made him, her listen and they love it too. Connie said, Musician on a Mission, for me, is how it's finally given me a chance to move towards the mixes I hear in my head. I now have a strategy for recording. I'm not just hitting buttons hoping for a good end result. Mark said, your courses and the ongoing training have completely turned around my mixing. Thanks very much for what, in my opinion, has to be the best training out there. Yes, I have tried others. Your training is yielding results I can hear. So with that out of the way, that's enough. Let's dive right into the meat of this. So the 7 steps that you're going to learn today: a gear, remove the room, vocal recording, 7 plugins, mix philosophy, focus mindset, and learning loop. Now, this isn't going to make much sense now, but by the end of today's workshop, this is going to make complete sense. But first, I want to address a big question, because I think it's important to consider why we're doing this, why you're here, why this stuff is important. So why are you recording at home? Why not just go to a studio? And I'm sure you already have your reasons. Maybe you just wanted to record your band. You wanted to see how your music sounded, once you laid it down. But there is an even bigger shift happening in the music industry, and I think it's really important to be aware of this. So the new music industry. Now, if you don't already know about this, there's an industry paper called the IFPI Global Music Report. And according to this year's report, digital revenues, which is like streaming, downloads, that kind of stuff, now make up to 58.9% of the entire music industry. So this is the majority of the industry now. And in 2019, that was 11.2 billion. Big number, doesn't really mean much. But as soon as we consider that in 2004, digital revenues only counted for 0.4 billion, and at the start of 2020,
2003, downloads and streaming didn't even exist. This is where it gets kind of crazy. The music industry has completely changed in the last decade. I'm not saying that you can just upload your track to Spotify and you're going to be a billionaire, but you can see this massive shift in revenue away from kind of selling CDs and that kind of stuff towards digital revenues. And in the old industry, to make a living as a musician, you had to have a record deal and huge sums of cash to go and create an album and then sell it and market it and that kind of stuff. Or you had to be a really high profile engineer or producer to work with those kind of artists. But now, if you want to be a musician or you want to get into sync or anything like that, well, you can get into the music industry and you can distribute your music and start collecting revenue. Yeah, it's not going to be a ton, but you can start building your fan base and you can get that foot in the door for just $1. Using a service like Lander that allows you to distribute your music to all the major platforms. And if you want to go down the kind of producer engineer route, well, there's this whole industry now of independent artists who are publishing their music on Lander for $1, and you can offer your services to them. You don't have to be a really high profile engineer anymore. I know plenty of people who are making a living as mixers, producers, working with just independent artists. Now, with all this being said, I think home recording fits perfectly with this new music industry. Again, whichever path you want to go down, the first step is to learn how to make awesome sounding music at home. You can't rely on studios anymore. And anyone can make professional sounding music in their home studio, in their home, and then share that music and ultimately get noticed. So this is the new music industry, and I think it's really important to be aware of this, because hopefully that inspires you to really take this seriously. So home recording is awesome, but that doesn't mean it's easy. Yes, it's easier than ever, but it's still hard work. And a lot of people seem to get stuck at bedroom demo quality and aren't sure what they're doing wrong. Now, in my opinion, this happens because it's easy to get distracted by tips and tricks on YouTube, advanced techniques like parallel compression, multiband compression, stuff like that, and shiny objects like plugins and new equipment, when it's actually the fundamentals that matter most. And at the end of the day, the kind of boring stuff. Now, all of this combined with a huge number of people teaching this stuff online, books, all of it, makes it all incredibly overwhelming. Now, I call this shiny object syndrome. And it's the number one issue that's facing self-recording musicians today, in my opinion. So shiny object syndrome, again, it's getting constantly distracted by all these distractions, trying to learn absolutely everything as well. You don't need to know every little thing about recording and mixing and engineering to make professional sounding music. So you want to ignore some of the more advanced stuff. And when you take into account that most people are only doing this in their spare time as well, it becomes really, really challenging. So instead, the solution here is that you need to have focus. It's about doing less, not more. It's about focusing on one thing at a time, one step at a time, not 1,001 different things and constantly getting pulled in all these different directions. You really want to focus on the fundamentals. And when it comes to making high quality music at home, you want to focus on 1 or 3 things at a time. And that's it. So in fact, let me give you those 3 things. First of all, you need good source material that already sounds awesome. Then you don't need to be a mixing wizard. You just need to be comfortable with the core mixing tools. And then 3, you need to adopt a good mindset and have good habits. If you have these 3 things, you can make radio-ready music at home. And this ties directly into the 7 steps that we're going to cover here today. You can see the kind of color coding now as to how the first steps relate to source material, etc., you get. So even if we ignore those 3 steps, those 7 steps, I just want to drill this in. These only 3 things matter. So let's start with source material. So what does source material mean? Well, it's the tracks that you're working with when you start mixing. So everything you do before you start the mixing process. So that's vocal recordings, any other recorded tracks, so acoustic instruments or recording drums if you're going down that route. If not, it's drum samples, any other samples you use. It's your dry guitar tracks if you're plugging your guitar straight in. And then what amp sims you use, what settings you have on those amp sims, what synths you use, what sound design you're doing. So everything you do before you start mixing, i.e. adding kind of compression, EQ, that kind of stuff, that's source material. And if you get all of this sounding awesome before you start mixing is going to be so easy. And this is really the key to hitting professional quality. You need to have the source material sounding good. Now, we don't have time to go deep into all of these 7 steps. We'd be here all day. So I'm not going to go really deep into this one. Instead, I'm going to give you an overview of each of these 7 steps as we go through these kind of 3 areas. And then we're actually going to dive deeper into the mixing step, because I think that's where most people stumble, and I'm going to open up my door for that. But let's start with step 1, which is gear. And you need to have the right gear if you have a chance of making radio-ready music. And when it comes to setting up a home studio, all you need to do is avoid having shiny object syndrome. So this is the gear that I recommend. If you have this gear, you have everything you need. You need a DAW, an audio interface, a microphone, a mic cable, stand, pop shield, the boring accessories, headphones, monitors, and some additional software. This is everything you need to make professional sounding music at home. And I even know some people who don't even have monitor speakers. Ideally, you want to have monitor speakers in a treated room, but if that's just not possible, it's going to be slightly more difficult, but it is possible to reach that kind of professional quality just mixing on headphones. And that track that I played you earlier that I said I recorded in Airbnb, I also mixed that in the Airbnb on headphones. So it's definitely doable. I'm not going to go through my personal recommendations here. You can just screenshot this if you want to look at some of the equipment. But what I want to drill in is like, this is everything you need. And if you have this, you have what you need. For most people here, I'd imagine you've already got these things. And if not, it's going to be easy and affordable to get them. You don't need loads of outboard equipment, hardware. You don't need this massive professional studio. This is everything you need. So once you've got that, step 2 is to remove the room. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, your room is holding you back because it wasn't built to be a studio. It's not a purpose-designed studio. It's probably made to be a bedroom or a living room, something like that. Now, in the long run, you want to add acoustic treatment to your room. It's going to make all of this so much easier. But you can also do everything in your power to remove the room from the equation. So, for example, you can use drum software and samples instead of recording real drums. Now you're doing it in the box. You're removing the room because you're not recording a real drum kit. You can use amp simulators instead of recording real amps. Again, you're doing it in the box, inside the DAW. You're plugging your guitar straight in, bypassing the room. You can use virtual instruments. You get the idea. You can also use Gorilla acoustic treatment. This is something we're going to come back to later to kind of kill the reverb in the room when you're recording. You can use cardioid microphones because they reject sound from the rear. So wherever you point them at, that's what they pick up. So that's effectively removing half the room as well. And then when it comes to mixing, you can use headphones as well as monitors. So when I'm mixing, even though I have a professionally treated room, I still flick back and forth between headphones and monitors constantly, probably about 50-50. And if your room is really bad, you can kind of go 75-25 in favor of headphones, again, to remove the room from the equation. Now, with all that being said, the best thing you can do is buy or build acoustic treatment for your studio. It's going to make recording easier. It's also going to make mixing much easier. So that is the kind of long-term goal. I use GIK acoustic panels, or you can just build them yourself. You search DIY acoustic panels. So you've removed the room. The next step is to record vocals, because there's not really a shortcut here. You can't remove the vocals because you need to record the vocals in a room. And since the vocals are such a kind of focal point, focal vocals, that's a bit confusing, but you get the idea. You need to get them right, and getting the lead vocal right can have a significant impact on the rest of the mix because it's what the listener is going to focus on most of all. And there really are no shortcuts here. So if this is something you're doing, if you're recording vocals, you need to get it right if you want your mixes to sound pro. Now, the key to this is getting it right in the recording phase instead of focusing on mixing. When it comes to vocals, the mix is really, really important. I don't want to kind of downplay that. You need to add loads of automation, get the levels really consistent. You need to use EQ and reverb and delay properly to get that kind of professional, polished sound. But if you don't have a good recording to start with, you're never going to get there. So you want to focus more on, sorry, I just hit the mic there. You want to focus more on the recording phase and get a professional sounding vocal at that point instead of thinking I'll fix it in the mix. Now, to help with that, just a little tip, I often tell people to back off the mic a bit. A lot of people seem to record too close to microphones. This only really applies if you're using a large diaphragm condenser. If you're using a dynamic mic, then you're kind of meant to get close. But if you're using a large diaphragm condenser, especially a cardioid one, you want to back off a bit, and that's going to give you a kind of more modern, mainstream, professional tone. And it's also going to lead to a more consistent sound. Now, another common mistake is people recording in closets and stuff like that, and I don't know, bathrooms, but you want to use a big room and get away from the walls. When you're close to the walls, it causes something called comb filtering. I won't go into what that is now, but it's bad. And you want to be away from highly reflective surfaces because it's going to change the sound of the vocal and destroy a lot of the frequencies. So you want to stay in a kind of bigger room away from the walls. And ideally you want a room with less reverb. So if it's got lots of hard surfaces, it's going to sound really reverby, like a bathroom. Imagine singing in a bathroom, it's kind of really reverby. When we're recording vocals, we want a really dry sound, the complete opposite of that. So a closet, again, unless you've got like a vocal booth where it's like heavily treated, that's the only situation where you'd use a small room. If it's just a normal closet, you're going to get a really kind of reverby sound and lots of close surfaces. It's a nightmare. So find a bigger room, record kind of in around the middle of the room, and then you can use guerrilla treatment to kill the reverb even more. So guerrilla treatment is just not professional treatment. So instead of building or buying proper kind of rock wall panels, what you can do instead is just get as many soft furnishings in the room as possible. So start by picking a room that already has soft furnishings in it. For example, a bedroom that's got a bed and a sofa in it and heavy drapes, curtains, whatever. It's probably going to be better than your kitchen. But at the same time, you can then bring more in. So if you can bring in a couple of mattresses and put them around you as you record, that's going to make a huge difference. Duvets, that kind of stuff. So there we go. We've covered source material. If you have the right gear, you remove the room and you record awesome sounding vocals. That's how you get good sounding source material. So let's move on to mixing now. And we're going to start with the 7 plugins, the only 7 plugins you'll ever need. Because once you have the right gear and you've removed the room and you have great sounding vocals, you have good source material, but now you need to mix the track. And this is where most people stumble. So we're going to dive much deeper into this step because this is really the most complex part of the process. So let me just open up my door now for this step and we're going to run through some stuff there. Okay, so let's start by just listing those 7 plugins. Now, kind of in order of importance, we have EQ, compression, reverb, delay, gate, gain, and limiter. So they're the 7 plugins. Now, I'm not expecting you to remember them right off the bat. We're going to run through now each of those plugins. So EQ, compression, they're pretty obvious. Everyone, I think, at this point is aware of the importance of those 2 plugins. They're pretty much the 2 most important plugins you have. Then the next one is reverb. And no mix is finished without reverb. And it's just what we use to create space and front to back depth in the mix. Now you can see on this track, I've actually got one kind of room reverb channel set up. And then I'm using sends to actually add reverb to stuff. So anything with B20 on it is going to that reverb. Most of all, I'm doing it on these group channels here. So I've grouped all the BVs and the guitars together, and then MISC, there's just loads of kind of random channels and sound effects and smaller parts in this track. But then I'm still doing some reverb on the individual channels. So yeah, of course, reverb is really important. Even if you're only using reverb in a really subtle way, and you're not using it as an over-the-top noticeable effect, you're going to need some reverb to give your mix that depth, that space, so that it doesn't sound too dry. And it's just a really important plugin. Now, of course, I'm also using reverb on the vocal itself. So if we go to my lead vocal bus here, you'll see I've actually got a bit of reverb just applied straight to the vocal so that I can adjust the decay time slightly differently. I have a slightly different sound on this reverb. But then we have delay, and pretty much the only place where I use delay in most mixes is on the vocal itself. So you can see I've got loads of vocals, loads of sends on this vocal channel here. So we've got like 16, 20, 20, and then yeah, 23, 23. So 16 we're not actually using. I think I'm using that for a different plugin as a sidechain. However, 20 through 23, it's this one, 20, 21, 22, 23. So that's our room reverb, our stereo delay, mono delay, and then I've got a short mono delay as well. So we've already covered room reverb, and I'm sending the vocal to that a bit. Oh, actually, no, I'm not sending that at all because I've got vocal, I've got reverb on the channel itself. But it's there ready to go if I want it. Then I've got 21, nothing on 22, and 23. So 21 is this stereo delay here. So this is the main way that I'm using delay. It's a stereo slapback delay on the vocal. So I have the feedback set really low. So normally between 0 and 10% or around there. And then I'll have a different time on the left and right. This is what this actually sounds like. So let's listen to the lead vocal in isolation.
And it feels like I'm on fire all the time. It feels like you want water. These thoughts of mine never know how long it goes on, never.
So that gives the vocal a sense of space without a noticeable reverb tail. And that's the main way I use delay, is how do I give things space like I would with reverb, but without pushing them back in the mix, which is what reverb will do. When you add reverb to something, it sounds like it's further away. And delay is a great way to do that. And then, of course, we've got mono delay as well, which is kind of like your more traditional echo delay. And that's where we have this kind of echo effect on the vocal.
And it feels like I'm on fire all the time. It feels like you.
So I've got two things going on there. There's this one here, which got really loud for a second, which I'm using as like a spot effect. So at the end of certain phrases, that comes up.
And it feels like I'm on fire all the time. It feels.
So to do that, I'm just increasing the send when it gets to there.
And it feels like I'm on fire all the time.
And I've got some crazy stuff going on there with like a flanger and all kinds of other stuff. So of course there are other plugins you'll have to use. But once we've finished going through these 7 plugins and I explain why they're important, I'm going to show you that basically they're the only 7 plugins that I'm using. Of course, there are more specialist ones like flanging. In certain situations, you might want to use a flanger, but you'll see that 90% or probably more, 95% of the plugins in this mix are those 7 plugins, and they're the only 7 plugins you need. So let's continue going through these. I've got this kind of short delay here, which you can't really hear, but I can whack that up so you can hear how that sounds.
And it feels like I'm on fire all the time. It feels like you want water. These thoughts.
So that again is kind of adding more interest and space to the vocal without pushing it back in the mix. So let's bring that back down. So we've gone through EQ, compression, obviously important, reverb and delay for creating space. Then we get into the more specialist plugins. Let's start with gain. So you can see a lot of gain plugins here, just all over the place. Now what I'm doing with these is gain staging, and that's just the act of making sure we're at a good volume at all times. So for example, let's take this channel here. Let's find out where we actually have some of this. So for example, right here,
it feels like you.
So we've got this weird chime effect. Now with the gain plugin, I'm just taking off 4 dB. So without that, it's a little bit hot. We're getting up to kind of -6. Ideally, I want to be peaking a bit lower. I want it to be sitting kind of around -18 down here. So we just cut some gain off of it. Now we've got more headroom. So that's a really simple introduction to gain staging, which is another topic we could go into in a lot more depth. But that's why gain plugins are important. Really boring, but it's a really important utility plugin. Then we have gating, and that's purely for pretty much acoustic drums. So on this track, we do actually have acoustic drums and electric drums. So we have this acoustic drum kit. But then we also have this electric kit. So let's just solo the acoustic drums here. Now on the snare itself, you can see I've got a snare top and a snare bottom. And I've got a gate on both of these, because without the gate, if we just solo the snare top,
All the time.
and then with the gate, so this is actually a virtual kit. If you listen,
And it feels.
it's a virtual kit, but for some reason there's bleed into the snare, and I'd much rather not have that bleed. Now, if this was a real drum kit, it would sound very similar, but way less controlled and way less polished. So even when I'm using a virtual drum kit here, sometimes you need a gate. Equally on the snare bottom. And then with the gate. So now we only have the actual sound of the snare to work with. Otherwise, when we start adding EQ and compression to the snare top or the snare bottom, it starts to change the sound of the whole kit. So that's why gating is important, also on the kick. And it's just one of those tools that sometimes you can't go without. And then finally, the last plugin that's absolutely essential is limiting. And the only reason you would need a limiter is if you weren't getting your tracks mastered. So if you're sending it off to a mastering engineer, you actually only need 6 plugins. But if you want the option of mastering your tracks yourself, then you're going to need a limiter. Now, there are certain contexts within the mixing process where we can use a limiter. For example, we can add a limiter to a vocal, but I tend to avoid doing that because it just kind of complicates things even more. Unless there's a very specific reason why you need it, you can get away with just kind of automation and compression on the vocal. So pretty much the only place you really need to use a limiter is on your mix bus. And without this,
And it feels like I'm on fire.
the track's pretty quiet. But if we want to get it to that commercial level so that we can upload this to various platforms and play it on CD, we need to get up to close to 0 dB without actually going over and clipping. The way we do that is we set the output of our limiter to minus 0.5, and then we push the limiter until we see some gain reduction on this meter where it's starting to actually clamp down on the audio.
And it feels like I'm on fire all the time.
And then we want to check the loudest parts for this.
Long it goes, no, I'll never know.
So it's that simple. I like to see 2-3 dB of gain reduction on certain peaks. If the output's then set to minus 0.5, that's going to be loud enough. A lot of platforms volume match now anyway, so we don't need to really push it. But again, just another tool that's essential. So they're the 7 plugins: EQ, compression, reverb, delay, gain, gate, and limiter. With those 7 plugins alone, you can get professional mixes. And if you look at all the plugins I've got here, they are pretty much all those plugins. So that's anything with FF Pro, could either be an EQ or a compressor, but that's pretty much it. Tape delay, that's delay. Stereo room, that's here, that's the reverb. I'm not going to go through all of these, but you get the idea. I'm pretty much only using those plugins. Virtual mix rack will be compression. This will be compression as well, and maybe some EQ. On the vocal itself, RVox is a compressor. You get the idea. So I'm pretty much only using those 7 plugins. Of course, there are additional plugins that are important. For example, saturation. And then there's kind of utility plugins like flanging or other things you might want to do that have those rare situations where you're like, I just need this plugin for this purpose. Also, I'm not including here plugins that you'd use more in the songwriting or recording or production process. For example, your VSTs and stuff like that. We're purely looking at the mixing context here. But either way, yes, those other plugins are important down the line, but not until you've really mastered these 7 key plugins. And anyway, you see FF Saturn here, that's saturation. So outside of those 7 plugins, I think the only other plugin I'm using in this track is saturation. So that's definitely something you want to start exploring after you've really nailed those 7 plugins, but it's by no means essential. And it makes a very, very small difference. Those 7 plugins will get you 95% of the way there. And then for that last 5%, you might have to start playing around with things like saturation. But that's pretty much it. So now I want to go a bit deeper into one of those tools specifically, which is EQ. And I just want to show you a quick trick for really finding the right frequency, because I know that's something that a lot of people struggle with. And EQ is the most important plugin. Of the plugins on that list, EQ is the most important. So let's find a source here. And I think the vocal is probably going to be the easiest thing to work on. So you'll actually see that I'm doing my vocal processing on a bus. And that's because on this vocal channel itself, where I've got the audio, I'm adding volume automation. So I went through and manually automated this, turning up and down different phrases depending on if they need to be louder or quieter to get a really consistent volume. So if I then added my compression and all my various processing on this channel, that would actually be before this automation, because the automation is on the volume fader. So it'd go through here, it'd go through a compressor, then it'd go through this. But I'd actually prefer to add compression after this, because if this is the level going into the compressor, it's already been adjusted, it's going to be more consistent because I've leveled out the volume. So the level going into the compressor is more consistent, the compressor is going to react better, be easier to control, etc. So what I do is I add volume automation on the channel itself, then I'll change the output to a new bus, so in this case it's bus 1, and then I'll do all my processing. You can see my EQ, compression, etc. is on this new channel, and that means it's after the automation. So just a quick note there. And what we're going to do is just get rid of this EQ that we already have. And we're going to start to EQ the vocal again. We're going to find some issues and fix them. So I'm going to use just the normal stock EQ for this. I'm going to start by having a listen. in the context of the mix, then I'll solo it. And the first step here is to identify an issue. Before I show you this trick, we have to first decide on our intention. And this can be, the difficult part. At the end of the day, there's various things you can do to help with this. You can use references. Over time, as you get better, you might just hear this vocal sounds really muddy. We can, just try things out if we want to. But ideally now we want to set some intentions, and we can do that by listening to the vocal in the mix, and maybe we'll compare to some references as well.
And it feels like I'm on fire all the time. It feels like you won't water these thoughts of mine. Never know how long it goes on. Never.
Okay, so the issue that I'm hearing is that the vocal is a bit too muddy. It's kind of getting lost in the mix. It's almost too warm. In solo, it doesn't sound so bad, but then when we bring the whole mix in, it's kind of just getting lost a bit. It's not cutting through as much as I'd like. So now we have our intention. And like I said, that's not always the easiest part, and listening to reference tracks will help with that. Just kind of having a rough idea of where you want to take it will help, even if it's as vague as I think it needs more top end, or I think it needs more or less bottom end. It doesn't have to be really specific, like I think I need to cut 500 hertz, because all we want to do here is get a ballpark intention. And then what we're going to do is this trick that I call turning it up to 11. And the basic premise here is we're going to go too far. We're going to turn it up to 11, and then we're going to back it off. And the term turn it up to 11 comes from that film, This Is Spinal Tap, where they have a guitar amp that turns up to 11, and that makes it louder than an amp that turns up to 10. So we're going to turn it up to 11, turn it up way too loud to find the right frequency, and then we're just going to back it off. We're going to bring it back down to below 11. So we go too far, we find the frequency, we back it off. Now that we have our intention, which is there's probably a bit too much low end, and it can be that vague. Obviously, we're not going to be boosting and cutting up here. So now at least we know kind of roughly where to start. So let's just start playing around with this. We can try boosting to find the area, and then we can try cutting to solve the issue. But either way, we're going to kind of just play around, move this around, and we're not going to make it really narrow like this. You may have seen this before, but to me, this just doesn't really work, because all that happens is you boost certain notes and it just gets louder at different points, and it all sounds kind of horrific.
And it feels like I'm on fire all the time.
So at certain points there, it does get louder, but that's just, it could be room resonances, but often it's just because you're boosting the fundamental of the note they're singing at the time, or the note that's being played. But instead, with this approach, it's still easier to hear, so we can find the frequency, but we know we're actually kind of in the right ballpark, and then we can tweak it from there. It's just much, much easier. So let's give it a go.
And it feels like I'm on fire all the time. It feels like you won't water these thoughts of mine. Never know how long it goes on. I'll 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 never know how long it goes on.
So that helps. So we kind of find the right frequency. It seemed like it was around here, but where I was boosting it was bringing out the issue even more. And that's what we want to listen out for, is if you are hearing a particular issue and you're taking this problem solving approach, which is what I recommend, you want to boost until you notice, okay, yeah, that's making it even worse. And then you know you're in the right ballpark. And then you can experiment with cutting too much to find that area. And then we can kind of tweak from here. So we could then tweak the bandwidth until we're happy with it. But I'm quite happy with that. Let's see if we can also try adding a boost in the upper mid-range to bring it out even more and help it cut through the mix even further.
And it feels like I'm on fire all the time.
So what I'm listening for here is an area where it doesn't sound awful, even though we're boosting by this much, and also an area that it sounds like it's kind of taking up space in the mix that's not already be taken up by something else. It's an area that's not already being used.
And it feels like
So up here sounds kind of bad.
and it feels like I'm on fire.
There it just seems to complement his voice a bit more, so we could try it around here. So we found it by boosting aggressively, and then we back it off like this.
And it feels like I'm on fire all the time.
And let's go to the kind of loudest part of the track.
I'll never know how long it goes on. Never.
So it's kind of making it sound a bit cheap there, so we could try somewhere else.
I'll never know how long it goes on. Never. I'll never know how long it goes on. I'll never know how long it goes on. Never. I'll never know how long it goes.
So there we go, we're getting there. It still needs some work, but either way, when you boost like this and you find the right frequency, you bring it down, you then have to adjust the taste. So there we kind of found that 1K worked, brought it down, and I wasn't really happy, so we started adjusting from there. But either way, that initial boost helped us find the right ballpark, and then you bring it back down. So just a little trick there you can use in your DAW when you're using EQ. So to recap now, only 7 plugins that really matter: EQ, compression, reverb, delay, gain, gating, limiting. Of all of those, EQ is by far the most important, and hopefully this little trick helps you to find the right frequencies to cut or boost. Okay, so you should be able to see the keynote again. If not, type in the chat, but I'll assume this is working. So step 5 is mix philosophy. Hope everyone's still with me here. I know I'm going really fast, but we need to kind of get through quite a bit more. So I hope the pace is good. Now, once you master those 7 plugins, all you really need to do is approach the mix in the right way, and then you're good for the mixing process. So the most important thing here is you need to have a workflow or a system that you can apply to every single mix, so that you're approaching every mix in the same way, and you can create consistent results. And also, when you have a system or a workflow, that's going to help you to know when the mix is finished, because you don't think, oh, okay, what do I do next? Instead, you're just going through the motions, going through the steps. So you need to develop a system that works for you, but you also need to have a clear understanding of the goals of the mixing process. So the first goal is balance, and this is what most people think of when they think of mixing. So this is, just volume balance. How loud are the different instruments? It's also tonal balance of the whole mix. If there's too much low end or too much top end, that's going to ruin kind of the sonic or tonal balance of the mix. Then it's also the dynamic balance. So if the vocal is too loud 1 second and then really quiet the next, we don't have balance in that sense. So this is kind of the main goal, but it actually goes beyond this into emotion. And this is where you really get to kind of from a good mix to a great mix. And it's something you want to have in mind. So going back to that example of balance, you'd think we'd want all the instruments to be the same volume so we can hear them all equally, but that's not actually the case. And that's why that first goal is kind of just one part of the picture. In reality, we want certain instruments to be louder than others. For example, we want the lead vocal to be much louder than a kind of percussive part that's just playing a supporting role. And that's because of emotion. That's because the lead vocal is what conveys the emotion, the story of the song. And that's because it's what people latch onto. So we want that to be louder than everything else. So there's this kind of extra goal here, emotion, that we need to have in mind when we're mixing, because balance alone isn't enough. Really, what we're trying to do in the mixing process is enhance the original kind of meaning of the song and make it hyper real and even better than it would be if it was just kind of, perfectly balanced. So that's it. If you get good with those 7 plugins and you approach the mixing process in the right way, you're good for mixing. You don't need to be a professional. If you have good sounding source material, that's all you need to do in the mixing process. But with these 2 things being said, you're never going to progress and reach that kind of radio quality point if you don't have a good mindset and if you don't have good habits. So this is what we're going to talk about now, and this is stuff that no one else really talks about. So step 6 is focus mindset. We've already kind of spoke about this idea of focus a couple of times here, and you want to make sure you're spending your time and energy focusing on the right things. Now, when it comes to the actual production process, you want to spend more time and energy on the things at the top of this funnel than the things at the bottom. So you can think of this as a waterfall, a funnel, however you want to kind of describe it. But the upstream areas like composition and arrangement, obviously just the song itself, are way more important than the downstream elements like effects, like reverb and delay. So when you're actually producing a song, you want to spend way more time on composition and arrangement than you do applying EQ and compression, for example. And just to clarify here, composition arrangement, that's just the song itself. Source, tone of room, that's what's the sound of the instrument in the room if you're recording. So what's the source, which guitar are you going to use? What's the tone of that guitar? And then which room are you going to recording? Where in the room? That kind of stuff. After that, it's recording quality. So once you've got a good sound in the room, it's, what mic are you going to use? Where are you going to put that mic? And then finally, we're moving into the mixing process, starting off with volume balance, the most important thing in the whole mix, and so many people overlook that. Then EQ and compression, your two most important tools. Then the kind of going back to the 7 plugins earlier, 3 core tools, so gain, gating, limiting, and then 2 key effects, reverb and delay, and then everything else. So most people tend to focus on everything else way more than the stuff that's above. So yeah, this gives you some guidance. You also need to focus on the right things in the learning process. So you want to kind of spend more time learning of things further upstream as well. And these 7 steps really are that framework. That's what I wanted to give you today, so that you know how to learn and how to approach this to get to that professional point. But there's more, and this leads us on to step 7, which is the learning loop. Now, if you want to get to pro mixes fast, you need all of these 4 key aspects: framework, practice, feedback, and guidance. And I call this the learning loop because you're constantly going around these 4 things. It's not just one at a time, you constantly go around them week by week. So what do they mean? So framework. Well, you need a proven workflow for the production process. You don't want to be just kind of twisting knobs and have tips and tricks but no idea of how it all comes together. You need a framework. You need a way of approaching the recording and mixing process that gives you consistent results. And you also need a plan or blueprint for the learning process. You need to approach this systematically. You need structure in your learning process. For example, when you're learning an instrument, you don't just, you could just go out and learn random songs, but you progress so much faster if you go through a structured learning. For example, here in the UK, we have a grading system. It's grades 1 through 8. For each grade, you're learning different scales, different songs, and it builds in the right order. You learn things in the right order. That's what you kind of want to get with this stuff as well. So focus on the things that we covered here today and try not to get distracted by shiny objects. And on top of everything we've already spoken about, you also need a framework for using each tool. So you could have, with EQ, for example, you could have kind of some tips and tricks, like if I boost this frequency on a vocal, it often sounds good. That doesn't really work. It doesn't really work like that anyway. But what you really want to have is an underlying framework, so kind of a step-by-step process or strategy, so that you can approach EQ in the same way every single time. And we dived into that a little bit here with that turn it up to 11. Step 1, have an intention. Step 2, kind of turn it up too far. Step 3, find the right frequency. Step 4, kind of back it off a bit. You want to have as many of these frameworks as possible, because then you know how to use these tools on a deeper level and you understand why you need them and how to use them with any instrument, and you don't have to rely on these kind of tips and tricks. And then practice. So great quote here from Ernst Schumacher: an ounce of practice is generally worth more than a ton of theory. So none of this matters if you don't execute and put it into action. Watching YouTube videos and never implementing what you learn is kind of like trying to learn guitar without ever picking up a guitar. So I'm sure you're already aware of the importance of practice, but it's easy to overlook in this time where there's so much online content and you just want to keep learning more and more, but you need to actually implement it. Then feedback. So you need a professional to listen to your music and say, this is what you're doing right, this is what you're doing wrong. And if you've ever felt like you're doing everything right, but it still doesn't sound the way it does in your head, and you can't quite get to that kind of professional quality, but you're not really sure why, you're not really sure what's holding you back, well, that's a classic case of when you need a feedback from a pro who can just instantly say, this is what you're doing wrong, and kind of tell you where to focus your time and energy and give you some direction moving forward. The other reason you need feedback is because when you're too immersed in your own mixes and music, so if you're writing and producing your own music, it's really hard to stay objective, but it's quite easy for someone else to come in and say, hey, this kind of sounds weird to me, or this sounds really good, etc. And then finally, guidance. So this one's tricky because it's really hard to find out, but ideally you need to find somebody who can help you with the really specific stuff. Sometimes it's hard to apply what you learn to your own music, your own genre, your style. So it helps to have a professional you can ask questions. And because music is so subjective and varies so much, it's really difficult to cover every genre in every situation, every context when teaching. This is something that I struggle with and I'm constantly thinking about. So you need somebody who can cover those areas that can't be covered in mass teaching. So basically you just need personal guidance, someone who can listen to your music and then give you additional guidance based on kind of what they're hearing and what style of music you're working with, and get really specific down to the details and the nitty gritty with you. So this is a constant loop that you need to go round and round. So we've covered source material, we've covered mixing, and now we've covered mindset and habits. And that's all the 7 steps now. So if you had these 3 things, if you had really good sounding source material, if you were comfortable with the core mixing tools, and you had a really good mindset and you developed really good habits that meant you progress much faster, do you see how it would be possible for you? Do you think that you could make music that sounded good enough to be played on the radio in your home studio? Because I think anyone can. And let's say you try all of this and you kind of mess it up a bit and you only make it 80% of the way to a kind of studio level sound. And it also takes you longer than you expected. How much would that still transform your music? How awesome would it still be to get to that point when most people won't be able to tell the difference? And that's if you don't do this perfectly. But what if you completely screw this up and you only kind of make a 50% improvement? Well, wouldn't it still be awesome to hear a noticeable improvement in the quality of your music? Wouldn't that still give you a lot of satisfaction and confidence, and yeah, just be really fun? So anyone can do this, and I hope I have proven that to you today. Now, I'm guessing you're here watching this today because you want one or more of these things. So you probably want your music to sound professional, or you're looking to take the next step in a music career as an artist or musician or producer, engineer, anything. Or you just don't want to waste time. You're doing this because you enjoy it and it's quicker to learn stuff from workshops like this. Now, I want to make all of these things happen for you, but that's not possible in an hour. So at this point, you have 2 options. Option 1 is go it alone and waste several years of your life figuring this stuff out, getting frustrated, hitting roadblocks, and wondering where you're going wrong. Option 2 is to learn a proven framework from somebody who has already done the hard work for you, truly mastered this process, and dedicated their life to teaching it. So this is the opportunity you have today. And option 2 is for you if you want to do this faster, if you don't think you can do it on your own and you feel stuck, or if you simply want to reduce the risk of failure and you want kind of a proven framework for getting to that professional level. Now, I really do wish I could give you everything you needed right now, but we'd be here all day and there's a lot that you have to know to get to that radio quality standard if you want to go deep into this and learn every single little step and learn how to reach that level. Really, we've only scratched the surface here today, so I have a special offer just for people still here watching. Our flagship program is something called Radio Ready Single. So what is Radio Ready Single? Well, the basic premise of this is that you'll work with myself and the rest of the Musician on a Mission team to finish and release a professional quality single from your home studio. Of course, you do everything yourself, but we just guide you through the entire process and help you along the way to ensure the end result is the best it can be. The whole thing's designed to get you to the point where you can churn out radio quality music from your home studio, but we'll get there by working on a single together because that implementation is really important. And then once you have this ability to make radio ready music, you can then just focus on making music that you feel proud to share online. You can start building your audience or advancing your career. So we focus on that first step so that you can then go on to focus on all those other things. Now, can you remember the learning loop from earlier? There were 4 key aspects: framework, practice, feedback, guidance. So if you want a quick, easy, and affordable way to get these 4 things, Radio Ready Single is the answer. So first of all, you get framework, and I give you a proven framework for recording and mixing to a professional standard at home. And this is everything. You'll have a step-by-step workflow for making radio ready music in your home studio. We go really deep into everything you've seen here today, and I give you the full structure for reaching professional mixes, and you'll learn everything in the right order as well. So we go through, songwriting, recording, editing, mixing, mastering, everything all in one place with over 30 hours of video. That's the core track, is about 30 hours. Then there's so much more than that, another 30 hours and more of kind of supplementary material. Basically, I just give you everything you need to reach that professional standard. And we go from the absolute basics to, first of all, make sure you're up to speed. So we cover, basic DAW stuff, basic recording and mixing, but you can skip that if you already kind of have an understanding of that. And then towards the end, we go pretty advanced, because this really is everything you need to get to that kind of studio quality. So we do have to go into some more advanced stuff. Now, the online training itself is completely self-paced. There aren't any deadlines, so it's up to you how quickly you want to get this done. Then practice. So as you know, practice is vital, but I hear from a lot of people that they aren't sure what they should be practicing or how to practice effectively and efficiently. So on top of the single that you're working on as you go through the program, we include a lot of focused practice activities to make sure you improve faster. And you'll be working on your own music. We do supply tracks, but most people opt to work on their own music because it's just a bit more time effective that way. Now, these assignments are purpose-built to have the highest impact in the least time possible and to help you progress much faster. Then feedback. So if you're trying your best, but your mixes still don't sound right and you're not sure where you're going wrong, this is exactly what you need. You need feedback, and I've seen how powerful this is. So the whole program is built around just giving you as much feedback as possible. So you get feedback on every single assignment that you do as part of the program. Of course, you get feedback at different stages of your warm-up track. So as you're going through the program, you work on one track and you get feedback first on just the recording, then the edit, then the mix, etc. And then at the very end, you go back and do your finished single. And when you do your finished single, we go back and forth until you're happy with the quality of it, until we're happy as well that you've progressed enough and you're reaching that professional quality. And just to clarify, the feedback as part of this program, it's not just a few pointers over email, but pages and pages of notes. So you can see an example here. We go really in depth and look at different areas of the mix and give you everything you need to take it up to that kind of professional level. And then finally, guidance. So now that we've listened to your music, we can give you specific advice on how to improve. And in general, some people just need a little more guidance, a bit more kind of hand-holding from somebody who has already done this before. So I'm here to basically help you apply what you learn to your genre, your style, your music, and make sure you're doing everything right. And if you have questions about anything at all or aren't getting the results we expect of you, we're on hand to guide you through the entire process. So in short, I'm basically here for you to ensure you reach radio ready quality. And this is mostly done over the live weekly sessions with myself. So it's a small group of people, 10 or less people every single week. I have my door open, going through stuff, demonstrating stuff. You can even send me your tracks to mix, or I just answer questions, or I dive deeper into different tools. Or you can just ask questions, and we keep it a small group to make sure everyone gets what they need. Now, you also have a personal tutor assigned to you who you can jump on a call with at any time if necessary, do a video chat, they can open up the door, look at your mix, stuff like that. So you have all the additional guidance, one-to-one tutoring and mentorship that you need. Now, let me give you a quick breakdown of the training itself. So section 1 is foundations, and this is where we cover the vital concepts that we come back to throughout the program, such as the 80-20 rule and how it applies to music and music production. You'll learn how to use your DAW efficiently. You'll get the recording for beginners mini course if you're an absolute beginner, you've never recorded before, and this is optional, so if you have, you can skip that. You'll learn how to finish songs and turn loops into full tracks, and I share my soft verse technique for writing verses fast. You get 9 songwriting hacks that work for me to just get more music out in less time. And then finally, you'll learn how to develop good hearing and develop your taste in music. And then recording. So we go through mic choice, mic placement, and recording different instruments. Then we go through the ear mic technique that helps you to record any instrument. We go through recording vocals to a professional standard at home with the gear you already have. Room setup and gear, we go through all of that. Home studio acoustics, using virtual instruments and VSTs and making them sound really realistic. And then everything else you need to know about recording specific to working in a home studio. So we cover all kind of types of recording. We cover recording virtual instruments and VSTs. We also cover recording real instruments, like we go through recording drums and stuff like that as well. So however you approach the recording process, even if you're doing electronic music, we kind of cover everything here. We go through synths and everything. Then editing. So we cover vocal editing, pitch correction and auto-tune, fixing timing, quantizing MIDI, even quantizing drums and other audio, then comping, and everything else that makes your track sound tight and professional. And editing is something that a lot of people skip over, but it's a really key phrase of the production process, so you need to get this right. And then we start to move on to mixing. So you'll learn, first of all, you get the Mixing for Beginners mini course. Again, this is optional, it's for people who have never mixed before. Then you'll learn about volume balancing and the high order trick. EQ, so I give you the complete framework for EQ. You'll have a step-by-step process for applying EQ, go through what it is, why you need it, and how to use it. Then removing muddiness and adding separation and clarity to your mixes. Compression, again, kind of the complete framework. Compression in different genres. Then panning and 50-50 panning, how to add stereo width to your mixes, and using references. Then we go through reverb and delay, when to use one over the other, and then again the complete framework for each with in-depth walkthroughs, demonstrations, how to make guitar amp simulators and MIDI drums sound more realistic. Automation is 7 ways to improve your mixes with automation. Limiting and how to make your tracks loud. And then additional plugins and techniques. So this is where we get to the more advanced stuff. Once you've really mastered those 7 plugins, then we cover the additional stuff that's kind of the last 5%. So saturation, R-bass, gating, dynamic EQ, multiband compression, parallel compression, sidechain compression, everything you need to know. Then we go through mastering, when to use each type. So automated mastering versus professional mastering versus home mastering, and then how to master your own songs if you want to go down that route. And then finally, mix improvement. So mix philosophy and the 2 key goals in the mixing process. We go much deeper into those. Mix prep, gain staging, bussing, setting up your DAW, your projects. Mixing systems, the system that I use called slow focus mixing. I also recommend 2 additional systems there for different kind of contexts. Then listening environment, room setup and mixing on headphones. Advanced EQ, advanced compression, how to approach different genres. And then the last section, finish your single. So you get a complete step-by-step workflow here for making music in your home studio. So I give you flowcharts and we literally go step by step from initial song idea to finish release track. And that's what I kind of walk you through. This is where I walk you through that workflow. Then you go through the whole process again. So you record, edit, and mix a new track from scratch. This is the one that will be your best sounding. So you learn a ton as you go through the program, and then you go back and record and mix again. Now after you've learned everything, then we'll go back and forth on that track till it sounds awesome. I'll send it to my personal mastering engineer and cover the costs. So you come out of this with a finished track, ready to release if you want to, most people do. And I can pretty much guarantee this will be your best sounding track ever by a long shot. And then I'm going to show you how to distribute your track to major platforms really quickly, cheaply, and easily. And also what you need to do to ensure it has a chance of taking off using the indie marketing checklist. And that's even going to help you get featured on Spotify playlists and stuff like that. So that's everything that's covered. All of this is hosted on a private members website that you can access 24/7. This is what it looks like. You just go through the different videos, go through the lessons here. And the program is entirely self-paced. So there's no deadlines, no time limits. You can join now and then you have lifetime access. Now, in summary, this is everything you need to make professional music in your home studio. And at the same time, I try and make sure every lesson is concise so you can learn as quickly as possible. And with our help, I can pretty much guarantee that you'll be able to produce music that sounds radio ready if you do the work. This isn't a magic bullet. It's not going to just turn you kind of into an overnight success. But if you do the work, I can guarantee you'll get there with our help. So imagine what that could do for you, your music and your life. Imagine the satisfaction when you listen back to your own music and you know this sounds good enough to be played on Spotify or the radio. Imagine sharing this track with your friends and blowing them away with the quality. Imagine how much confidence that would give you in your work. This is your chance to start taking your music seriously. And whatever your end goal is, it all starts here with the ability to make high quality music in your home studio. And this has been proven by our past students. Once you get that down, you can then go on to the next thing, start a career or whatever you want to do in the long term. So for example, one of my students, Patrick, who was making music that sounded like this just months after his first ever home recording. But that's not all there is to Patrick's story. Once he got that down and he had those mixes that sounded professional, he started sending them out and he got signed off the back of that track. So first you have to make awesome sounding music and then you can move on to doing everything else you want to do. Now, this program has been battle tested in the real world and it works. Over 622 students have been through this program. I'm just going to share a few kind of comments from them. So Will said, my mixes have improved 100% like Surreal, and now I know how to approach the mix with intention. Rob said, the course had a huge impact in my mixing. I went from almost copying EQ and compression settings found on YouTube to actually listening to what the song needed to get the sound I want. It was amazing. Joe said, Rob really lays everything out and you can see results in weeks rather than years. The support team at Musician on a Mission are second to none, even Rob replies. And Luke said, for me, with my daily job, it is a good format. I can quickly log in during some free time and do some sessions. Most changes in my workflow in the speed of working. I work more efficiently. Without listening, I already know what I can set as parameters for certain aspects in the mix. So let me give you a before-after example from one of my students now. His name is Chris Cummings. And this before version is his finished mix from before he joined. So it was a fully done track. It's not just a recording or anything like that. Fully finished. But then after going through the program, he decided to go back and redo that track. And that's the after version. So the difference is pretty crazy. It's louder as well because he learned how to master tracks better. But in addition to that, there's kind of more low end, more top end, more clarity, more width, more depth to the mix. And now I want to share a short video that Chris sent over about the program.
Wanted to talk this evening a little bit about the Musician on a Mission program. You know, it turned a lot of disparate YouTube videos, little kind of lessons here and there. It put a lot of structure to that. I think getting that system and, you know, having a bunch of random facts that you know and putting it all together into concise, structured processes it made sense to me and has been huge in what I've done so far. At the end of what wound up being probably like 12 weeks or so to actually get through the course, a few months there, I could tell the difference. You know, the tracks are getting clearer. It doesn't sound just like you're listening through a wall or a screen anymore. There's nothing better. The time I save and then the structure that I have now, and I feel like I could take my friends' bands and be like, hey, yeah, give me a track and I'll know what to do with it.
So let's wrap up now. Here's what you'll get when you join today. You're going to work with us to record, mix, and release a radio-ready single from your home studio. You'll get a self-paced online training program with 30 plus hours of HD video with those assignments, feedback, and guidance. So all 4 aspects of that learning loop. A complete step-by-step framework for making professional quality music at home. So you get a step-by-step workflow, but I also give you everything you need to reach that professional quality. And then, of course, mentorship with the weekly coaching session with myself, and you get lifetime access to that. So I'm on hand to help you every single week for the rest of your life to make sure you hit that professional quality. Most people get there within a few months, but even if it takes longer, I'm still here to help. Now, before I talk about tuition fees, I want to put this into perspective for you. So I studied audio production at the University of Kent here in the UK, and in total my degree cost me about $53,000. At a college in the US, a similar degree could cost you well over $100,000. On the other hand, what if you decided to go to a local studio to lay down an album? Well, you're looking at about $5,000 for a half decent album, and that's just one album. But after going through this program, you'll have the ability to produce an unlimited number of tracks. And then if you want to, you can even charge people for that service, or you can make awesome sounding music and make money out of that a number of other ways in the new music industry by getting it synced or getting commissioned to do work. Doesn't matter. It's going to be quite easy to see the return of the investment you make here. So the total investment for everything we just covered, all of this that you see on screen now, to get to that professional quality and release that radio ready single is $1,800. Of course, if you don't want to pay $1,800 outright, we have a payment plan available, which is $180 per month for 12 months. Now, this program is currently closed to the public. It's invite only, and you can't just go to our site and join. So normally we interview people to see if they're a good fit, because we'd be working with you on a deeper level, and I want to make sure we can actually get people to that professional quality before they join. If they're not committed enough, we won't bring them in because it's going to kind of lower our success rate. So this is a bit of an experiment. We don't usually open up Radio Ready Single like this, but since you made it this far, I want to extend an invite your way because you're clearly somebody who cares about music to make it to the end of this workshop. So I'm opening up registration until the end of this webinar, only for people who are still watching here right now. So you should see a button just on the bottom right corner there. You click that and it's going to open up the registration form. And just to reiterate, it's just $180 to join today, and then 11 more payments of $180, or you can save a bit by paying in full, and that's $1,800 in full. So when you click that link that you now see on the bottom right, you'll be taken to a secure order form. That's where you register, enter your details. After that, you'll get an email right away with your account details. If you already have an account with us, it will just be added to your account. And then you can log in straight away and get started. Just seconds from now, you could be inside going through the training. Like I said, registration is going to be open until the end of this webinar. So now for the next 10-15 minutes or so, I'm going to run through some FAQs, some frequently asked questions about Radio Ready Single, and that's going to give you some time to make a decision about whether you want to join or not. First of all, how much time will it take? So the whole program is entirely self-paced and you get lifetime access. So there is no time limit. The core training itself is about 30 hours. We're constantly kind of adding and updating it based on feedback. So I don't know exactly how long it is right now because we just added more material this week, but it's around 30 to 40 hours. But then there's a ton of supplementary material, another 30 hours. Again, we're constantly adding to that. So the core track is what you go through first. And then once you've released your single, you can then go back and dive into some additional stuff to just improve even more. So how long it takes you to complete the assignments and the single, though, that depends on you. So 30 hours for the training, but then how long it takes you to actually put it into practice, of course, depends on what style of music you're doing, how quick you work, etc. But you can take a whole year or longer if you want to. There is no deadline. Most people get this done in kind of like 2-3 months if they're working on this part-time, but you can take much longer if you have to. And I still have people who are working on this like a year later because they only have an hour or two a week, and that's absolutely fine. It's built for part-time musicians, it's built for hobbyists, it's built to work around a full-time job and other commitments. Of course, if you are doing music full-time, that's awesome. However, if you are just doing this part-time, not a problem. Do you have a refund policy? Yep, so we have something called the win-win guarantee. So if you finish the program, submit all the assignments, get all the feedback, you basically do the whole thing and don't see a dramatic improvement in quality of your music, we'll give you a full refund on the full amount, or cancel the plan if you're on that as well as refunding it. And we'll pay for another recording or mixing course of your choice up to $500 in value. So basically, if we fail you, we'll make up for it. Worst case scenario, you walk away with this with way more knowledge than when you started, way more experience, and you actually get $500 towards another course, because if we failed you, then we'll kind of like give someone else a shot. And there's no time limit to this. This is a lifetime refund policy. So you have as long as you want to go through the full program. If you're not satisfied, you can get a full refund and $500 towards another course to kind of make up for it on our end. So the real question is this: is it worth gambling some of your time just to give it a shot? Who was this built for? I'm not sure if it's right for me. So if you're a part-time musician, you have like a day job, music is combined to weekends and evenings, or if you're retired and now have time to spend on your music, or if you already work on music full-time and want to advance your career. The most important thing though is you're kind of recording your own music at home. A lot of this will still apply to recording in a professional studio, but it's targeted specifically and built specifically for how to make professional sounding music in a home studio. It's designed for people who are mostly working on their own. So if you use lots of virtual instruments, you're doing a lot of the instruments yourself, then this was kind of designed for you. But equally, it also applies to people working in bands or collaborating with others, because you're just going to be the kind of main engineer if you're working with other people, because you'll be the one with the knowledge. It works for any skill level. We go from absolute basics. If you're already kind of like a late beginner or intermediate, you can skip that stuff, and we help you. We kind of show you when to skip stuff. And then towards the end, we get really advanced to make sure you've got absolutely everything you need to reach that professional quality. So any skill level, any genre. If you're leaning towards kind of a more modern approach of using lots of VSTs, where you might just record vocals and do everything else in the box, then again, that's kind of one of the specific approaches that I had in mind building this. But we still cover recording, because you never know one day when you might want to record drums, or if you are recording real amps. Like, we go through how to record everything as well. And in terms of the actual genre itself, it doesn't matter, because the way I approach this isn't genre specific. What I teach will work with any genre, and where it doesn't, and kind of the rare cases that it doesn't, I'll then discuss that and talk about, okay, well, actually this is something you want to do differently in pop versus rock music. That's why we do have some lessons on how to approach different genres. For example, there's a whole lesson on how to use compression in different genres, because that does vary, whereas something like EQ doesn't really. And then we've also got a whole lesson on how to approach different genres on the whole, because there are some slight nuances. It works for any DAW. I use Logic Pro, but one of the reasons I use that is because it's really kind of simple and easy to see what's happening on screen. We also go through the basics of all the main DAWs. So I actually have lessons in here that take you through how to get started in your DAW. And then finally, on top of all of that, I'm looking for people who are really ready to put in some work and actually make music. Again, it doesn't have to be something where you're going to commit like several hours a week to doing this, but as long as you're committed to making this work in the long term and you're actually going to put the work in, then yeah, I want to open this up to you. Now, going deeper into skill level, if you are a beginner, this is going to save you years of hard work trying to figure this out for yourself. So if you feel overwhelmed with all of this, what you need is a step-by-step framework to guide you through the learning process. You need that kind of systematic, structured learning approach, and that's what you get with this program. If you're an intermediate, this is going to take you over the last hurdle to professional mixes, because most intermediates kind of hit a plateau where they've been learning stuff online for a while. You've got a lot of the basic information from YouTube, but your tracks still don't sound professional and you're not really sure why. So this program is going to solve that problem for you, specifically with the feedback and the guidance, but also in the training itself, we go really deep, and there's lots of stuff here that isn't covered in YouTube. And on top of that, of course, it's the whole kind of workflow framework approach. You don't get that big picture understanding from YouTube. You just get tips and tricks. So all of that together is going to help you break through that rut. And then finally, if you are advanced or expert and your mixes already sound really professional, then actually this isn't for you. If you're already making radio ready singles, you don't need to join this program. So yeah. What if I want to do an EP or album? Does that mean I can't join? Well, either way, it's best to start with a single. Even if your goal over the next couple of years is to release an album or an EP, you have to start with something. I actually recommend kind of doing singles anyway and keep releasing singles, but if you want to do an EP or an album, that's fine. We'll work on one track first and get that sounding really awesome, and then you don't have to release it though, and then we can give you additional feedback on the rest of the EP or album before you release it. So basically, we'll cater this to you. If you are really set on doing an EP or an album, then we will kind of adapt this and we'll give you additional feedback to make sure that whole release sounds good. Who are your competitors? Are there other programs like this out there? So there are other sites like ours that teach home recording, but there are no other premium programs like this. So the closest comparison is some college and university courses or private schools like Full Sail, Point Blank, that kind of stuff. A lot of them offer feedback and some personal tuition. Yeah, absolutely. However, this is built specifically for musicians who record at home. As far as I'm aware, there aren't any other programs that do that. You also get a step-by-step framework for the entire process. So we look at all areas from songwriting to recording to editing, mixing, etc. Whereas a lot of these kind of even private courses with Full Sail will focus on one area like mixing. And then the other thing here is that this program is constantly being developed alongside musicians who record at home. We're always updating it and changing it based on feedback. We make changes to the course every kind of couple of weeks or so. Of course, there's the coaching sessions if there's additional specific stuff you want covered. But when we get feedback on the training itself, we constantly update that. So it's been through probably like 10 different big iterations now, and we're also adding to it, changing it every couple of weeks. So I think that really sets it apart, because at this point it's just been honed in to be exactly what people need and what people want. And it's completely remote. You can do it from the comfort of your own home. And finally, it's self-paced and get lifetime access. So I don't know any other programs like that either. A lot of, even if you do kind of an online program with like Full Sail, someone like that, which I think they do offer, it's still time limited. Whereas this is lifetime. So if you are doing this part-time and you don't want to commit several hours a week, or like 10, 20 hours a week, and instead you just want to spend like a couple of hours a week on it, and also you want to have lifetime access to the training so you can constantly come back and refer to it, and also get access to all future versions, then yeah, we give you that lifetime access. You don't really get that at a lot of private schools, and definitely not at kind of college or university. Couldn't I just learn this from YouTube and other free resources? So the issue with YouTube that I hear quite a lot is that there's way too much information, and you end up wasting pretty much all of your time just searching for the good content. And YouTube, at the end of the day, they just want to show you more ads. So the videos that do well on YouTube and that their algorithm picks up are the videos that get the most views to show the most ads, and they generally are the kind of the tips and the tricks that sound really exciting and everyone wants them, but they don't have like a big impact on the quality of your work, and they don't take you closer to professional mixes. They help, but they'll give you like a very small incremental improvement. So These videos generally are only surface level and you end up with no big picture understanding of how it all comes together as well. When you're just watching 10, 20-minute videos, it's not enough time to actually convey the big picture stuff. So you end up kind of with that lacking. Plus, there's a ton of conflicting info and it's hard to know who to listen to. So yeah, there's lots of problems with YouTube. Books and blogs are good as well, but they tend to be more theoretical. Of course, if you're just reading, you don't actually get to see or hear anything in action as well. So it's nowhere near as practical. And with all of these, anyway, if you do go to YouTube, yes, there's some really, really good content on there. We have a whole YouTube channel, but you don't get a full framework. You don't get that big picture understanding. You don't get a step-by-step kind of start to finish framework. And you don't get that from any of these resources. But even if you put that to one side, with these other approaches, you're not getting hands-on learning. You're not getting any accountability by working with people. If you struggle to release stuff and actually, get stuff done, then this accountability is going to really help. You don't get feedback from professionals, and you don't get that kind of additional guidance and mentorship from a professional either. I really want to join, but I can't afford it right now. Is there anything you can do? Well, with the payment plan, just to reiterate, you can get access for just $180 a day. You can get started with this. So if you want to do that, you just click the button on the bottom right, go to the registration page, and then there's a box that you tick to choose the payment plan. Besides that, there's nothing else we can do. We never do discounts on this program or anything like that. Can I join at a later date? So like I said, Radio Ready Single is currently closed to the public. We normally have an interview process where myself or somebody else on the team gets on a call with the applicant. And that's just because we have a high level of involvement. So we want to be sure that we will, first of all, enjoy working with you, and also be sure that we can get you the results we're promising. So like I said, this is a bit of an experiment. We'll see how it goes. But if you don't join now, at some point, you might get invited to apply in the future. But that could be months from now, and I'm guessing that you don't want to waste any more time when you could be making much better music and taking the next step toward a career in the music industry. Maybe you have some goals already set out for the next few months, and if you delay this even further, you're just pushing those goals back. Of course, the sooner you can start making awesome music and getting it out into the world as well, it just feels great to get to that point. So if this is something you want to do, the time to register is now. This is the time to take action and start taking your music seriously. At the end of the webinar, entrance is closed. So that's in just a couple of minutes here now. So let's recap again. So when you join today, you will work with us to record, mix, and release a radio ready single from your home studio. You get access to a self-paced online training program with 30 plus hours of content and additional assignments, feedback, and guidance. You get a complete step-by-step workflow for making professional quality music at home, and you get lifetime mentorship with the weekly coaching session with myself. So all of this can cost you just $180 today, and then 11 more payments of $180, so 12 in total, or pay in full $1,800 and you save a bit. So just click that button to register. It's going to take you to that registration form, enter your details. You'll get an email straight away with your login details. We're going to be wrapping up here in just a moment as well, so entrance is open for just a couple more minutes. So the real decision you're making here isn't whether or not to join this program or any other program out there. That's kind of irrelevant. The real decision you have to make here is whether or not you're ready to commit to making professional sounding mixes in your home studio, or whether or not you want to continue making mixes that sound the same, wondering where you're going wrong, feeling overwhelmed with the whole process. That's the real decision you're going to be faced with until you are ready to change. It's really a decision about how committed you are to your music and how much of a priority music is in your life, how soon you want to achieve your goals as it relates to music. So if you've stuck with me to the end of this webinar, clearly you care. So I encourage you to take action now and start taking your music seriously. Others will jump into this today and start making real progress in their music careers, just making professional sounding music. So why not you? If you want to finish and release a single that sounds radio ready so you can share your music with the world or start a career in the industry, this is the fastest, easiest, and most assured way to do it. And remember, we have a lifetime refund policy as well. If you give it a try, you complete the whole program, see if it works for you. If it doesn't, you get your money back and $500 towards another course. So I want to put the risk on us entirely. There's no risk on you. I want to put the risk on us. So just give it a try. Ask yourself, what will happen if you don't take action? If you turn up this opportunity? You could waste years of your life figuring this out for yourself. Instead, work with us and you could be making radio ready music just weeks or months from now. So hit the button now to register. Once this webinar ends, the program is closed. And if you do want a few more minutes just to kind of run through finances, think it over, or anything like that, you can open the page now by clicking the button and leave it open. And then if you close that page, it'll be gone. But you need to click the button now to open that page, open the registration page, and then you can always come back to that in a few minutes when you're ready to join. But either way, we're kind of closing everything down now. This is the end of the webinar. So thank you so much, everyone, for watching this far. I really hope you come away with this with lots of actionable, useful advice, and hopefully now just some kind of direction in how you progress forwards and how you're going to take this to the next level. You know what to focus on. So my last kind of message here is just focus on those things and you will progress much faster. So that's it for today. I really hope you enjoyed this webinar. I'll see you again soon.